Good morning, KCPS. It's good to be back with you. This is Sarah with CIPD. Last week you read with Miss Megan and you guys talked about the illustrations. Today we're going to read another book and we're going to focus on the illustrations again. Remember, the illustrations are super important in our stories, and those are the pictures that are drawn by the illustrator. Remember when we were talking before with Miss Megan, illustrations are in a text and they show us all kinds of things. They tell us about the setting or the characters. They show us what's happening in the story. They can create a mood in our story, and they can give us lots of extra details that are not in the text. We find things in the words, but then we also find lots of things in the text. So today we're going to read a story called Stone Girl, Bone Girl. It's a true story of Mary Anning. It is written by Lawrence Ann Holt, and the illustrations are by Sheila Moxley. So today when we're reading Stone Girl, Bone Girl, we're going to pay close attention to the illustrations in our story. Let's start reading. Stone Girl, Bone Girl, a story of Mary Anning of Lyme Regis. When Mary Anning was a baby, she was struck by lightning. It split a huge elm tree and threw Mary right out of her nurse's arms. Her father was in his carpenter's shop when he heard the terrible news. He dropped his hammer and ran through the stormy streets of Lyme Regis. Gently, he lifted the limp body of his little daughter, and his tears flowed like rain. But then an extraordinary thing happened. Mary Anning slowly opened her eyes. She reached out a tiny hand and touched the amazed face of her father, and the little girl began to smile. It was then her father realized Mary Anning was no ordinary girl. The years rolled by like waves, and Mary grew into a clever girl. A mind as quick as lightning, her mother teased. Mary had few friends, except her father, whom she adored. Like everyone else in the town, she called him Pepper because of his speckled beard. One Saturday, Pepper closed his workshop early. He took Mary down to the cliffs by the crashing sea. She held tightly to his hand because she knew how dangerous it could be. The clay cliffs at Lyme Regis are soft as melting chocolate. Mary had sometimes seen huge slabs of land slipping and tumbling into the beach below. Pepper had stories of whole fields on the cliff tops which had disappeared beneath the feet of grazing cattle. He knew a place, he said, where half a farmhouse sat balanced on the cliff's edge. He and his quarryman friend had peered over and seen the remains of the kitchen and even the garden gate smashed to splinters on the rocks below. When they came to the place called Black Fen, Pepper reached into his pocket and, to Mary's surprise, took out his best steel hammer. He knelt beside a large rock of dried clay and began carefully tapping away. "What are you looking for?" asked Mary, dancing about on the sand. "Just be patient," laughed Pepper. He worked as carefully as if he were making a fine piece of furniture. Mary bent closer. There was something hidden there, right inside the rock. At last, Pepper pulled it free and handed the thing to Mary. It's treasure!" she gasped. "It's what we call a little snake stone," smiled Pepper. "Just a curiosity. A present for you, Mary girl." It was the most beautiful thing Mary had ever seen. Back in the workshop, Pepper polished the snake stone and hung it on a string for Mary, like a perfect necklace. That night, Mary couldn't sleep. Her head swirled with thoughts like the twisting golden stone. "The cliffs are full of treasure," she whispered over and over again. From that day on, Mary spent every spare moment searching for the curiosities. She had sharp eyes and found them everywhere, in every shape and size. Tiny shiny ones, marble ones as big as millstones, others straight as stone fingers or delicate like plants. Pepper taught her their strange magical names: thunderbolts, fairy hearts, crocodile's teeth, devil's toenails. He let Mary have her own special drawer in the workshop for her collection. But the other children laughed and teased when they saw Mary hunting near the cliffs. Someone made up a rhyme: "Stone girl, bone girl, out on your own, girl," until Mary ran crying to Pepper. That winter was the wettest and stormiest the town had known. Great waves smashed the little houses and the cliffs became softer and more dangerous still. So Mary stayed away. The cold, damp air made Pepper feel ill. He looked old and tired, and sometimes he coughed so loudly that Mary felt afraid. One evening, some rich ladies came to Pepper's workshop. Mary knew who they were. The Philpott sisters who lived together in a fine house high above the town. Scientists, people said. The young ladies The youngest of the ladies, Annie Philpott, wanted Pepper to build a glass-fronted cabinet to display curiosities, she said. Mary jumped up. She couldn't believe that someone else was interested in curiosities. "Excuse me?" Mary said nervously. "Would you like to see my collection?" And she pulled open the drawer. "Oh," gasped the ladies, "what wonderful fossils!" Fossils? Mary had never heard the word. The Mrs. Philpott smiled. They could see that Mary didn't know much about her collection. "I'll tell you what, Mary," said Annie Philpott. "When Pepper has finished my little cabinet, why don't you bring it to us? We could have some tea, and then we will show you our collection." For 3 long weeks she waited for Pepper to finish the cabinet, but he seemed to be working more slowly than ever. Mary was very worried about him. But at last the elm cabinet was finished. The wood was from the very same tree that had been struck by lightning and had almost killed Mary as a baby. She thought it was the most handsome thing that Pepper had ever made. Slowly Pepper wrapped the cabinet in brown paper and tied it with a string. His old hands were shaking as he kissed Mary. Mary had never seen anything like the Philpotts' house. There were expensive rugs in every room and maids to serve the tea. Most wonderful of all was the collection of curiosities. The Mrs. Philpott explained that the fossils were the remains of ancient sea creatures that had been preserved in the clay. Everything was so interesting that Mary forgot to be nervous. Then Annie Philpott showed her a huge tooth she had found. From a great sea monster, she said. She told Mary she believed the rest of the creature was still out there, hidden in the cliffs. If anyone could ever find that, Mary, that would be the greatest treasure of all. It was nearly dark when Mary ran down the hill. As soon as she pushed open the workshop door, she knew that something was wrong. The workshop was so quiet after Pepper died. To Mary it felt as if half of her world had fallen away, like the farmhouse on the cliff edge. And there was no money. Her mother began to sell everything she could think of, and still they went to bed hungry. One evening, Mary wandered up to the churchyard. A heavy fog hung over everything, ragged clouds dragged at a lemon-sliced moon. And as she came to the stone that marked Pepper's grave, something moved in the darkness. For a moment, Mary was afraid, but coming closer, she realized it was nothing but a funny little dog. A little dog with a coat like speckled pepper. The dog bounded over and licked Mary's face. When she turned to walk home, the little dog came too. At last, it ran into the workshop and curled up under the table. "Perhaps you need a friend too," laughed Mary. From that moment, Mary and the dog were never apart. That summer, the town was full of holidaymakers. As Mary and her dog watched the rich ladies and gentlemen wandering the streets, she suddenly had an idea. Perhaps she could sell her curiosities. She dragged a table from the workshop onto the pavement and carefully arranged the fossils from her collection. Well, all except the snakestone around her neck. That she would never part with. She wrote a small sign in her best handwriting, "Curiosities for sale." Then Mary Anning and the little dog sat down to wait. The first to pass were a group of children. They began laughing and pointing at Mary. "Stone girl, bone girl, out on your own girl," they shouted. All day Mary waited. She was just about to pack away her table when a group of ladies and gentlemen came by. "How fascinating," said a lady. "What are they?" asked someone else. "This one will make a delightful brooch, or a garden ornament." And so Mary Anning sold her first fossil, and as the rich people strode away, Mary felt the weight of coins in her pocket. "I knew I was right," she whispered to her dog. "These aren't just ordinary stones. They really are treasures. If only I could find that sea monster." All summer, Mary searched for curiosities for her shop. She borrowed books about fossils from the Mrs. Philpott and learned everything she could. Her mother was delighted with the money that Mary was earning, but she was worried about Mary alone on the dangerous cliffs. Mary reassured her that the little dog would run for help in an emergency. As she searched, Mary thought more and more about the giant sea monster and about the cliffs in prehistoric times. She imagined fantastic landscapes with extraordinary creatures. One morning, Mary was so busy daydreaming she didn't notice that her dog had wandered away. She ran along the beach calling for him, but he was nowhere to be seen. At last she heard a faint bark, and looking up, she saw the speckled dog high on the sloping side of the cliff. Mary called for him to come down, but the little dog wouldn't move. He was furiously scratching at something in the clay. Mary had no choice. She began slowly to climb the rock face, and at last she reached the little edge where the dog was standing. Her heart missed a beat. She couldn't believe what she saw. Grinning up at Mary was an enormous skull. The little girl had found the sea monster. All morning, Mary scraped furiously with Pepper's hammer. There was more than a skull, a whole skeleton perhaps, but it was far too big for Mary to handle on her own. Who could help her? Suddenly, she remembered Pepper's old friends, the quarrymen. Leaving the little dog to guard the monster, Mary Anning climbed carefully down to the beach and then ran as fast as she could to the quarry. "I found it!" she shouted. "I found the sea monster!" In less than 10 minutes, Mary was leading a group of quarrymen carrying picks and shovels up the side of the cliff. The news spread like fire through the town. "Mary Anning has found the sea monster! Mary Anning has found it!" An excited crowd gathered on the beach to watch the excavation. The Mrs. Philpott arrived in their fine clothes and made a tremendous fuss of Mary. Even the children who had teased her came to watch, but they weren't laughing now. As the evening sun melted into the sea, a strange procession made its way back to the town. A small girl covered in mud led the crowd. At the back, 6 strong quarrymen carefully carried the bones of a real sea monster, as long as a tree and more than 165 million years old. The skeleton was laid on the floor of Pepper's woodshop for all the world to see. For months afterwards, visitors came to meet the fossil girl of Lyme Regis. Famous scientists came in carriages from London and even the King of Saxony. It was the most important fossil ever found, they said. They called the monster Ichthyosaurus, the fish lizard. The museum that bought it paid enough money for Mary and her mother to live happily for the rest of their lives. But the strange thing was, the little speckled dog had gone, as if he had done his work and drifted away. Sometimes Mary imagined she could hear a faint barking from far away in the sea mist. Then Mary Anning would smile and touch the little snake stone around her neck and step back into the warm workshop where the shelves were filled with treasures from the dark and dangerous rocks. Mary Anning was born in 1799 and lived all her life in Lyme Regis. At 15 months, she survived the lightning strike, which killed her nurse and 2 other girls. Mary was always stubbornly independent, and she became a well-known local character, hunting for fossils accompanied by her little dog. At the time, this was an extraordinary occupation for a young girl. The great Ichthyosaurus, which she discovered at the age of 12, was only the first of Mary's many finds. She later uncovered several other hundreds of fossils which can be seen in the museums around the world. Lyme Regis continues to attract fossil hunters, and children still chant the old tongue twister about Mary Anning. She sells seashells on the seashore. The cells that she sells are seashells, I'm sure. So if she sells seashells on the seashore, I'm sure that the shells are seashore shells. The end. What an excellent book! That's a true story. And remember, today we were looking at the illustrations. We were paying close attention to them. And in this book, the illustrations really help to create the mood. We can look at this page and we can tell that the mood on this page is very different than the mood on this page. And then we can even tell that the mood on this page changes in the story. We know the characters feel different because of the illustrations. So today, and all the time when you're reading, make sure that you really look closely at the illustrations in your book so that you can learn more about the characters and the setting. Have a great day! See you next time!
Welcome back. It's Miss Mimi Antal. Welcome to ELA Tuesdays. And today we're working with students in grades 3 through 6. We're going to work on reading today in ELA. You know what? One of the things that I most enjoy, just in general, is reading. I love reading a good book. And unfortunately, sometimes I don't really have that much time just to enjoy reading. But what I'm going to ask you to do is to take some time to just read. And I'm also going to suggest that you try something to kind of increase that enjoyment that you have for reading. So, once again, this is ELA Tuesdays. Welcome as we prepare for another episode. Before we get started though, this is what you're going to need. I added some things up here on the board so that you can see today. So once again, welcome. Today we're going to work on text-to-text connections. And like I started to say initially, That's going to enable us to really enjoy what we're reading more so. It's also going to increase our comprehension, our understanding. So as you can see here, I've added a learning target. Let's see, I've got a pointer here. I'm going to try to use it and see if it helps. So the learning target today is, I can make personal connections with the text I read in order to increase comprehension and my reading enjoyment. Okay, so you remember that word comprehension. So that's what we're going to be working on today. The only things that you'll need for today's lesson would include a notebook or maybe a piece of paper so you can take some notes and jot some things down, which also means that you'll probably will need a pencil. And in addition to that, I'm going to ask that you pick a good book, a fiction read, so you can practice some of the things that we're going to work on today, later. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, do you want to count me back in?
Yes.
Oh, I wish I hadn't had that there. Okay, go ahead.
So what do you do?
Just count me in again so I can start again, like officially.
All right.
You don't have to stop it.
I just gotta do this.
Okay.
And 3, 2.
Welcome back. So like I was saying earlier, today we're going to work on making connections with the text that we read. We're going to make connections between what we read, or the text, and ourselves. There's multiple types of text and connections, but today we're going to make text-to-self connections. Personal connections are made when we're reading a text and when we see something in the book that reminds you of something that's happened to you. Has that ever happened to you? Have you already made these sorts of connections between text and self? Because something in the text just reminded you of something that has already happened. Another type of text-to-self connection would be when you notice a character in the book seems similar to maybe yourself or someone else you know. That's another type of text-to-self. Here's another one. What about when you find an idea in the text or in a book that's similar to your own ideas or maybe even your own opinions? Yep, once again, you would be making a personal connection, a text-to-self connection. Lastly, something you read makes you think about life or the world in a new way. So once again, listener, if you remember, I was telling you about just how much I enjoy reading. And one of the things that I enjoy most about reading and how it makes me feel is that no matter what I read, when I'm done, I'm somehow changed by my involvement with the text. It's always for better. Sometimes it helps me solidify my own thinking, expand or stretch the way I think, or sometimes it challenges me and challenges my thinking, but it always leaves us a little bit different, and that's because we're making those connections. Okay, so I'm going to give you some ideas about how you can try to use this as you're reading. One of the things that you can do is you can ask yourself some general questions about the text and those connections with yourself. Here are an example of a few. You could ask, in what ways are the events in the book like or unlike my own life? Today we're going to read a little bit from the Watsons Go to Birmingham again. And in today's part of chapter 1, it is absolutely hilarious. I can't wait to share it with you. But there's an event in this book that I definitely have a connection with. I'm sure I'm never going to forget this part. Sometimes it increases our comprehension, our understanding, but sometimes making those connections also increases our ability to remember what we read too. Another question you can ask yourself might be, what about the characters, events, or setting is interesting to me? When you think about how I am involved in this, you're once again making those connections. Here's another thing to think about. What surprised me, excited me about the book? And lastly, are the author's opinions like or unlike my own? Okay, so I'm going to start. Today, as I do the think aloud and I read the text aloud, I'm going to actually think out loud or share with you what I'm thinking in my mind as I make connections to self. And then as we go along, I'll give you an opportunity to try it too. That's what the paper and pencil is for, so that you can jot down some of your connections. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so welcome back. Let's go ahead and try to make some connections with the text. And like I said, I'm going to try it first, and I'll do it through a think aloud. So if you remember, before when we were reading The Watsons Go to Birmingham, we last left off where the main character, 10-year-old Kenny, is out with his brother de-icing the car. And in de-icing the car, actually Kenny makes a connection here. He has a flashback of experiences that happened to him previously with his brother and another friend. We're going to continue right where we left off. So, as me and Bai scraped the ice off the brown bomber, I wasn't going to get folded, or rather fooled again. I kept on chopping ice off the back window and ignored Bai's mumbling voice. Okay, so listener, do you remember where we left off now? They're outside scraping the ice off the car. And don't forget, as we continue to read through this, we're going to make some connections, some text-to-self connections. The next time I took a little rest, Byron was still calling my name, but sounded like he had something in his mouth. He was saying, Kitty, help, help. When he started banging on the door of the car, I went to take a peek at what was going on. Bai was leaned over the outside of the mirror, looking at something in it real close. Big puffs of steam were coming out of the side of the mirror. Stop. This reminds me of something else. This reminds me of when you see cars that take off in the winter and big puffs or plumes of smoke come out from the back of the pipes on the vehicles. It reminds me of a cold winter day. Back to the story. I picked up a big hard chunk of ice to get ready for Byron's trick. Help me! Go get Mama! Go get Mama! Oh! Ah! I'm not playing, Byron. I'm not that stupid. You'd better start doing your side of the car or I'll tear you up with this ice bowl. He banged his hand against the car harder and started stomping his feet. Oh, please, Kia, help me. Oh, go get Mama. I raised the ice chunk over my head. I'm not playing, Bai. You better get busy or I'm telling Dad. I moved closer, and when I got right next to him, I could see boogers running out of his nose and tears running down his cheeks. These weren't tears from the cold either. These are big, juicy, crybaby tears. I dropped my ice chunk. Bai, what's wrong? Help me, Kia, go! I moved closer. I couldn't believe my eyes. Byron's mouth was frozen on the mirror. He was stuck as a fly on a fly strip. Stop. I want you to try it now, listener. Are you making any connections to the text? Is there anything here in the text that reminds you of something that's happened in the past? Or perhaps a character that is similar to either yourself or someone else that you know? Okay, I'm going to continue to read, but now it's your turn to try. So as I continue to read the story, grab that piece of paper and your pencil and jot down any connections you may have. Now what I'll do is I'll pause a little bit after reading to give you a chance to actually write that down. Okay, let's continue as we try to make those connections. I could have done a lot of stuff to him. If it had been me with my lips stuck on something like this, he'd have tortured me for a couple of days before he got help. Not me, though. I nearly broke my neck trying to get into the house to rescue Byron. As soon as I ran through the front door, Mama, Dad, and Joey all yelled, "Close that door!" Stop. Okay, listener, why do you think they were asking him to close the door? Yep, exactly. You remember how cold it is in the story? Let's continue on. Mama, quick, it's Bai. He's froze up outside. No one seemed too impressed. I screamed, "Really? He's froze to the car! Help! He's crying!" That shook them up. He could cut Byron's head off and he probably wouldn't cry. Kenneth Barnard Watson, what on earth are you talking about? Mama, please hurry up. Mama, Dad, and Joey threw on some extra coats and followed me to the brown bomber. Stop. Okay, take a few moments to jot down any connections that you may have had with the text. I'll go ahead and wait. Okay, let's come back together. As we finish up here, listeners, this would be a good opportunity too to share some of these connections that you have with the text with someone at home or someone near you. Okay, let's go ahead and continue. The fly was still stuck buzzing. Oh, Mama, help me, get it. Oh my Lord, Mama screamed. And I thought, ooh, let me grab this paper. And I thought she was going to do one of those movie style faints. Oh, she even put her hand over her forehead and staggered back just a little bit. Joey, of course, started crying right along with Byron. Dad was doing his best not to explode laughing. Big puffs of smoke were coming out of his nose and mouth as he tried to squeeze his laughs down. Finally, he put his head on his arms and leaned against the car's hood and howled. Byron, Mama said, gently wiping tears off his cheeks with the end of her scarf. It's okay, sweetheart. How'd this happen? Stop. Okay, I'm gonna make another connection. I'll think aloud here. I remember as a child, my mom would always wipe tears just to make me feel like it was gonna be okay. It got a little embarrassing as I got older, but I think that's definitely a connection that's gonna help me comprehend and remember what I'm reading a little bit more. Asking how it happened. Can't you tell, Walona? This little knucklehead was kissing his reflection in the mirror and got his lips stuck. Dad took a real deep breath. Is your tongue stuck too? No. Quit teasing. Help! Well, at least the boy hadn't gotten too passionate with himself. Dad thought that was hilarious and put his head back on his arms. Mama didn't see anything funny. Daniel Watson, what are we gonna do? What do y'all do when this happens up here? Mama started talking Southern style when she got worried. Instead of saying here, she said here. And instead of saying you all, she said y'all. Dad stopped laughing long enough to stay, or rather long enough to say, Walona, I lived in Flint all my life, 35 years, and I swear this is the first time I've ever seen anyone with their lips frozen to a mirror. Honey, I don't know what to do. Wait till he thaws, I suppose? Pull him off, Dad, I suggested. Byron went nuts. He started banging his hands on the Brown Bomber's doors again and mumbling, No, Mama, don't let him. Joey blubbered out, This is just like that horrible story Kitty read me about the guy, Narcy, who stared at himself so long he forgot to eat and starved to death. Mama, please save him. She went over and hugged her arms around stupid Byron's waist. Mama asked Dad, What about hot water? Could we pour enough hot water on the mirror so it would warm up and he could get off? She kept wiping tears off of Bai's cheeks and said, Don't you worry, baby. We're going to get you off of this. But her voice was so shaky and southern that I wondered if we'd be driving around in the summer with a skeleton dangling around the outside mirrors by its lips. Dad said, I don't know. Pouring water on him might be the worst thing to do, but it might be our only chance. Okay, listeners, I think that's probably a good stopping point for today. I'm definitely interested in listening to more, and I promise I'll be back with more. But let's stop and kind of recap some of the things that we learned and we talked about today. So today we were talking about making personal connections, text-to-self connections. What I'd like for you to do, as we review, I want you to remember the reasons why we make these connections. Some of the reasons why we make these connections is because it helps us comprehend and remember what we're reading, but it also helps us to enjoy what we're reading. Now, later on today, or sometime throughout the week, as you're reading your book, remember it's to be fiction, it's to be a fictional story. But as you read your text or your book, I want you to jot down connections that you're making with regards to text to self as well. So today you learn that readers relate to characters, stories, and ideas, and we make these text-to-self connections. And this week, don't forget to jot down those personal connections. Okay, well that's all we have for you today on ELA Tuesdays. We'll see you next time.
Kindergarten is great at Kansas City Public Schools.
I know they have really good teachers. I know this is great school.
They teach them stuff that I thought my kids would never be able to know at the age of 5.
Since deciding to send our kiddos to a neighborhood school, we've become even more of a part of our community.
Now is the time to enroll your future kindergartner for the new school year. Visit enrollkc.org today.
Good morning, Kansas City. Welcome to another edition of KCPS Homeroom on this ELA Tuesday. I'm your teacher today, Chris Odom. I'm English coordinator for the Kansas City Public Schools. So today we're going to talk a little bit about a book called Racism in Kansas City, A Short History, and review a term called content vocabulary. Okay, the author of this book is C.S. Griffin. He went to Rockhurst College, which is right near where I work for the Kansas City Public Schools, so I drive by it every day. He's known as a political author and an activist, and again, this book came out in 2013, and it's called Racism in Kansas City. We'll use a small bit of it today to talk about two passages and apply what you hear to an idea called content vocabulary. Okay, let's just talk a little bit about today. Content vocabulary, we're going to get a definition going. It's a little different than academic vocabulary. Academic vocabulary are the words that you need to think about the kind of learning that you do in specific classes, like evaluate or analyze. We call those words academic vocabulary. They show up in most of your subjects. Content vocabulary is a little different, and we'll look at why. Okay, we're going to work on doing something called annotating, and I'll show you what that looks like on a couple examples. When we annotate, we're looking for significant words, sometimes words we don't know, and words that are a big part of the overall meaning of the text that we are studying or reading. I'm going to read two paragraphs from a particularly interesting part in this book, and we're going to apply that to the ability to listen for context clues, and then how we might use annotation to help track the developing meaning that we're reading. Okay, content vocabulary. You may have seen an example like this one, where if you put the definition in the middle, it really helps you think about really what it means, what are the characteristics of that word, and what are some examples of that word, and then what are some non-examples. Because you can say what it's not, then you're really able to speak on what it is even more clearly. Okay, so content vocabulary, just to get that definition out there, are words that are specific to the central meaning of the text, and they're often crucial to our understanding of the text. When you think about that word crucial, that means that without them it wouldn't mean the same thing. Okay, so we're going to try a passage in this book, and we're really going to be listening for this word and thinking about what it means. So I'm just going to kind of throw that out there, and I will tell you this image is significant. It has a little something to do with more the abstraction of the meaning of this word. But see if you can pick out exactly what it means in the passage that I'm going to read. And while you're doing so, I would also like you to listen for other words that you think are crucial to the meaning of this passage. Okay, here we go. This entrenched social and economic separation is now an accepted part of life in Kansas City. In 2011, researchers from Brown University and Florida State University ranked Kansas City 23rd among America's most segregated cities. Integration here is better than in Detroit, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and St. Louis, but worse than Nashville, Richmond, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Phoenix, Las Vegas, and Atlanta. The ranking is an improvement from previous studies, owing in part to an increasing black population, at 13.4% of the greater metropolitan area in 2011, and middle-class blacks joining whites in the suburbs. But segregation is not the deadliest issue. Okay, and so in that one paragraph, you may have heard that word early on. Would you pick out any other words in that passage that you think were central to the meaning? Let's explore what this word might mean and put it back in the context that it exists with this sentence up here. You notice it says this entrenched social and economic separation is now an accepted part of life in Kansas City. And that's an interesting quote, because I sure believe that most of Kansas City doesn't just want to accept that part of life, but it seems to point to maybe it's entrenched. So what does that really mean? Did this cavernous space between these two rocks just appear one day? Or did it take a long time for it to become what we might see there on this image? In some ways, entrenched might have a similar meaning, that it becomes so much a part of the day-to-day life that it becomes something that we think we're so used to, right? And when it's talking about this economic and social separation, there's some other words in this specific paragraph that might help point to other meanings, like segregation or integration. Okay, so we're going to apply this same strategy one more time, and I'm going to read on the next paragraph. And if you're working with us at home, you're probably going to want to try this next technique called annotating. And while you're reading, you can do some active behaviors that will help you remember later on what you were reading, especially helpful when you're studying, and especially helpful when you're really preparing yourself maybe for something that you're going to do based on what you read. Then you don't have to have it all memorized, and you've got all these nice marks in your book that help you remember what you were thinking while you were reading. Okay, so maybe you might underline words that you need to go back and look up, or look up in the moment. With the technology that we all have, you really could just stop for a moment and find out what that word means. And then you're going to write some important thoughts in the margin, maybe some notes that you had. When I look back through my book, I see I have Post-it notes and other things that we might consider those forms of annotation. Okay, so last paragraph I'm going to read. And I'm really just going to chop into this paragraph a little bit. And then we're going to go from there, and you're going to apply this strategy. Okay, so I want you to think about listing some significant words that you hear, and then perhaps list some of the words that you may not know all the way to look up later. There's been a sharp increase in the number of extremist hate groups in the U.S. since Barack Obama's election. Regression always threatens to undo the gains for which so many fought. A 21-year-old white man who read hate group literature allegedly massacred 9 African Americans at Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina on June 17, 2015. The tragedy revealed how far white denial and ideas of racial transcendence could go. The suspect posted photos of himself online in a jacket with historic flags of apartheid regimes in Africa. In other photos, he held the Confederate flag. The attack coincided with the anniversary of Denmark Vesey's planned slave revolt of 1822. Vesey helped found the church where this attack occurred and possibly planned the revolt there. The suspect reportedly told the congregation before firing that he was there to shoot black people. Okay, so again, we're reading this book and thinking about the overall title. We're thinking about the vocabulary. We're thinking about the significant words that help paint the meaning in this extremely important reading about our own city. So did you hear some significant words in that passage? Did you hear words you might want to look up later? Did we hear words like transcendence? That's a big word. Racial transcendence. We heard apartheid and regimes. We heard the word tragedy. We heard the word massacred. So you can see how when you start to collect some of these words and put them back together, it might help you with this next part. What did they help you think about might be the central idea of what we just read? Remember, we've done that in the past. And again, the vocabulary really is the best way to start to understand what's being talked about in each passage. Okay, so which words carried the meaning of the passage I just read? When we talk about carrying the meaning, right? He's carrying some meaning. But the words in a passage or any form of writing help carry the meaning because they contain a lot of information, and they also contain kind of emotional significance. That's both the connotation and the denotation of words. Okay, last thing we're going to think about is when you go out there and you find something to read, I want you to work on annotating and looking for the crucial words that help us understand the meaning of the passage. Also, look for some of these amazing, cool words that you might not know all the way what they mean, but when you look them up, it really expands your understanding of what you were reading about. I hope this has been helpful in having you think about how, again, content vocabulary might be a big part of what you do at school every day. Maybe we've given a couple strategies to think about with annotating, and certainly looking at words for their overall meaning of the text. I hope you're having a great day out there, Kansas City. Have a great one. See ya. Kansas City, and welcome to another edition of KCPS Homeroom. I am your host, Chris Odom from the Kansas City Public Schools, where I work as the English coordinator. This morning I am joined by another of my prior students from Paseo Academy of Fine and Performing Arts, Miss Ronnie Marsalis. Yes, okay. And I'm not going to mess up like that over and over again. I'm pretty sure I know who she is. We want to account for the artist's name. So let me make sure she gives you a chance to find out how you can find her. And we're going to go through this process today and learn a little bit about what she's been doing since she graduated. Recently, quite a bit, I think. And so will you give us an update and tell us what's been going on with you? And what year did you graduate from Paseo Academy?
Whew. I graduated in 2012. So, and since then, since graduating, I took a year off to go to college. I went to Mizzou, which is where I wanted to go. I was studying architecture and with an emphasis on interior design. And while I was on campus, I would go to visit the vagina monologues and be participating in dance, with a dance team and doing spoken word for the Black and Gold pageant. And I discovered, I really like spoken word poetry. And that's what started the transition for me since leaving school. I ended up leaving college and pursuing a spoken word journey. I came back to Kansas City. I went to excuse the sound, but I went to participate with the Bold Poets and went to UCM and performed some spoken word. I performed some spoken word for the Black United Front. Then I ended up moving to New York, and that opened up another realm of possibilities. I was on a college tour. I participated in a Muhammad Ali documentary and the director says, well, shoot, Ronnie, you won us an NAACP Image Award. So in 2016, so since then, I kind of just kept pursuing that path of spoken word and music. And now, fast forward, after leaving New York, I was in Dallas for a little bit. Then I went to California, still doing the same things, working on music, performing. And now I'm back here in Kansas City, and I released a new album titled Amnesia that tells you a lot about what I went through.
Very cool. Awesome. And I've heard this album, and I've heard the song that we're going to listen to here in a little while. And then it's so exciting to have you here to talk to us about what we will unveil here in Kansas City in a minute. Tell me a little bit about what prepared you to go out and do that. Did you get any prior experiences? And I kind of know you did, since I was one of those people back there at Paseo watching people decide to be in a show. And so, I don't know what attracted you to being part of it back then, and what keeps you doing it now?
So what attracted me to doing it back then, first and foremost, the therapy that you get. You have a voice, a place where if you feel in a way and you don't know how to articulate those feelings, you know, writing, doing poetry, performing, period, you know, creating art, period, is therapeutic. So that is what attracted me to it. It was therapeutic, and not only was it therapy for me, I noticed that it was therapy for other people. You know, other people looked into what I was doing and found inspiration. So that right there, aside from just living my purpose and my calling, that's what keeps me going. And also the selflessness of knowing that, you know, other people might need to hear what I have to say, because ain't nobody saying it for them. You know, that's what also keeps me going and pursuing.
Fantastic. Okay, well, we have a treat today. We're going to go ahead and experience one of Ronnie's songs here. And this one's called Fool in Love. It is from the album Amnesia, right? And I remember you and I had a talk about what would be a good choice. And the fact that it's set in Luce Park really seems special. I've lived here a long time, right? Do you like that park? Has that been a part of your experience in Kansas City? Why did you choose Luce Park?
The song is, what's funny is the day that I actually filmed, there was a couple there taking wedding pictures.
Oh yeah, lots of people do that.
Right, and the song is called Fool in Love. So I'm like, where do people go in Kansas City to be all in love and stuff? And I'm just like, The director, he was like, we can do Luce Park. They have a bunch of flowers, you know, and it sets the tone for what you're talking about, you know. It's I wanted the feel of it to be organic, and a lot of people love Luce Park. When people tell me, they're like, oh, I see your video, you filmed that in Luce Park. You know, a lot of people, a lot of natives here really appreciate it too, you know. So I just kind of felt like it's a good representation. It was a good representation of me, where I'm from, you know, the beauty that we have here. And it's a landmark that a lot of people go to experience. Even non-natives go there when they hear, you know, just visiting.
Okay, well, let's take a second here on this morning on ELA Tuesday and check out Ronnie's song. I think I'm failing to say your artist name correctly. Can you tell me it for sure so I get it right?
It's Ronnie Marsalis. You can say
I had it. I just want to be sure. So this is Ronnie Marsalis, Fool in Love. We're just going to watch a snippet for about 1:30. We'll be back to talk about it. All right, that was a snippet of Fool in Love from Ronnie Marsalis from her album Amnesia. And we're going to talk about it, a little bit of unpacking to do of why and what she was trying to say in this song. You might have a hint when it's called Fool in Love. I hope you appreciated and enjoyed the talent that I began to know, I think, as far back as when you were a sophomore in high school. Do you remember how old you might have? Was that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, you had it on point.
Okay, I'd try to guess, but it's somewhere in there, right? And that's probably the first time you tried out for Coffee House or did a piece. So, and you were which major at Paseo? Because I know you were not necessarily a creative writer. Is that right?
I was actually a theater major for sophomore year, and then junior and senior year, I want to say junior year, I switched over into dance.
Gotcha. So if you don't know, Paseo Academy in Kansas City Public has majors, and students can select an area of expertise. What was so exciting for me is I ran a show there called Coffee House, and we didn't limit the groups we pulled from. We over the years, we realized the talent with writers and everybody was in a lot of the other departments just as much as it was in our own creative writing department. Like, a lot of the visual artists possess just this rich ability to, make visual things happen in their writing. So really fun. I was honored for all the years that we had those shows. It was amazing is we only charged like $3 or $5, and I knew for a fact in 5 minutes it was worth that much. It was like, get ready for a show that's worth $3 or $5. It's worth $35 some nights, I think. So, okay.
Yeah, Coffee House was good.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was saying Coffee House was good. One of my graduates, one of my friends who graduated with me, Bam Brandon.
Yeah.
He made me cry reciting a poem at Coffee House one day.
Yeah.
And then you remember Tyler Johnson? Mm-hmm. Made me cry with his dancing at Coffee House. So Coffee House has some deep,
very deep
tear jerkers.
Yeah, respect due to Tyler Johnson and his family.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about "Fool in Love." It's you're capturing an awful lot in that, like the verse, the quickness of your rhyming, like the patterning that you're coming up with there. I think I've always been kind of wishful that we would have more female artists take on, kind of the challenge there. And, I've always just been dying for like another voice. We have some, I don't know maybe you'd recommend somebody to me, but for you, like, that's rocking. Like, what do you like about this song, or what do you think other people like about this song?
The passion. I love the passion. I love my delivery. I love the honesty, the transparency of it, and lyrically, I love it. I will say it's one of my best songs to me. Just before I even wrote it, I was watching some National Geographics, and they were talking about how the universe came to be and how the earth came to be, and just how meteoroids created water and certain elements in the earth. And I'm just like, when I started it, when I approached the song, I'm like, well, if that's true, and if that's how the earth came to be, then I came to be, through my father, then why am I not feeling like, I'm meant to have that Cinderella kind of love, or just that type of stuff? If things are meant to be, why isn't it meant to be for me? If things have a way of working out and coming from something, my path ain't lining up that way because I keep getting heartbroken, So that's kind of the approach that I had with that song. And
sure. So, while I'm hearing your amazing answer, that by no means sounds like what we condition people to do in school. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm wondering, like, how you would advise other young people to keep this kind of like spiritual realm or awareness to me, like the philosophy of things. I was talking to Unique, and he's still driven a lot by some philosophy that he applies kind of through Buddha about the restless mind. And we were like, wow, that's so. To me, that doesn't happen a whole lot when in our curriculum and the things that we intentionally write into school. So, like, what do you do to make that happen instead? Or how does that happen for you? Like, how do you make that part of you stay alive?
I would say anointing, prayer, reading the Bible, reading holy scriptures, and just keeping in mind all the time that if I wouldn't listen to it, don't write it. If I wouldn't want my child to listen to it, don't write it. If I wouldn't want, my fellow students, to listen to it, don't write it. you just have to have, stay true to you, what your sound is, because a lot of times when is it unique, you said?
Unique.
That stays in tune with just the spirituality of things. And a big part of staying in tune with the spirituality of things is staying in tune with you, your path, who you are sent to be here on this earth. Because everybody has a sound, a voice, a path. You have to find your voice in the midst of it. And eventually from books that you read, your things that you do on a daily, whatever you entertain yourself with or indulge in, that's what's going to come through your pen. Like, that's what's going to come. And as I said, before I even started writing, I was watching National Geographic and also contemplating a recent heartbreak. So I just combined the two. You just kind of got to be in tune with you, what your interests are, and write from that place.
Well, thank you so much.
Art from that place.
It's so rare to get to kind of unpack what's going on in the artist's mind before they write a piece like that. And for you to be able to place it back in such a cool way, it's really fantastic. And, I hope the same stories exist for all great songs, but I wonder, sometimes people are like, nah, I just wrote it down. So that's really, really exciting. And I can hear you're driven by a lot of the things that you maybe started to discover early on that have not disappeared, only kind of grown. So that's always fulfilling and exciting to hear from people that I knew a long time ago. I dare say that was a long time ago. We start to think that way. So again, we've been on here talking with Ronnie Marsalis this morning on KCPS Homeroom. Let's let you send us out of here, Ronnie. Is there anything you'd tell a young student who's pursuing their dreams only in their head so far? What would you tell them about that?
It ain't nothing to it but to do it.
That's
it's for real. When and the last thing I still do this. The procrastination, just knock that out the way. And the work ain't even hard. It's not as hard as you think it's gonna be when you ain't sitting in your head. So just do it. Just get the ideas out and they start flowing and they start making a way for you. Just do it.
Yep.
Don't let nobody deter you from what you feel it is you need to be doing.
To me. Again, thank you so much, Ronnie. It's been fun. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Mr. Alden.